I had self-image issues for most of my life. The person I had known for a while through various club scenes and interests was an incredible photographer. He posted on social media that he was looking for a model to shoot some interesting work. At the urging of some friends who told me it would be good for me, I accepted. He showed me some photos that he had done with some people I knew from the time I had met him, and they were gorgeous. I hadn't seen Ron, the photographer, in a while, and he seemed quite different. I knew he was married, but hadn't seen or heard from the wife either, though I wasn't really close with either of them. During the time I met these people, 10 years or so before, we were heavily involved in the rave scene and the attendant drug abuse that goes with it. I had stopped doing that quite some time before, and I had expected them to have grown out of it. I was living with my boyfriend. I can't recall if we were married at the time, and I was going to ask him to go to the shoot with me, but I decided not to as I was very nervous. This was my first time in front of a camera and wanted to do well. I spent the day doing my hair, putting together clothes to take, eating well and things like that. I arrived and we made some small talk, smoked a cigarette, etc. At one point before we started, he nipped upstairs to smoke some pot. That struck me as odd as he didn't used to, but whatever. I never saw his wife at all through my 6 or so hours I was there, until nearly the end, when she came out in a bear onesie she had made, as she knew that I loved the series the character was from. The shoot ended up being very cool. He made me very comfortable. We had discussed what we would shoot beforehand and traded some ideas, as well as him showing me some sketches he had made with me in mind. We started the shoot off, with me wearing various outfits, and then, at my choice, slowly progressed to nude photography. The guy had seen me nude before, and I tend to dislike clothes anyway. We did a ton of photos, including some really cool things with my body piercings and tattoos, as well as random props. When we finished, he took me up to his office to go through the photos together before editing. I was in absolute shock. The person in the photos was not me at all. I didn't recognize her. She was so beautiful and relaxed and self-assured. I could not believe it and kept trying to rationalize it to myself. I didn't really say anything about it, just remarking how he made me look so different from the way I see myself. I was in awe at his eye. I go home and am utterly exhausted. I tell my boyfriend about the shoot, how Ron made me so comfortable, how amazing the photos were. I think I took a photo or two on the computer screen and shared it. He was so supportive, telling me that was how he saw me and things like that. A few days later, Ron sends me the raw photos as well as some edits, all watermarked. We both agree that we should do a shoot again and schedule it. I told him my boyfriend wanted to come next time and he said that would be fine. Having an extra pair of hands would be great. We get together and everything is amazing like before. The wife comes down once or twice and makes positive comments about the shoot. Now, it didn't click at the time, but his wife, Leah, used to be extremely outgoing and gregarious. She knew everyone, promoted events, organized meetups outside clubs, things like that. When it came to me about the huge change in her personality, I brushed it off as people changing. During the second shoot, I brought along some of my BDSM equipment. I worked, briefly, for pay, in a professional capacity doing BDSM in my past. I had a lot of contacts. We set up some interesting shots using the equipment, and it was a lot of fun. My boyfriend really enjoyed the shoot, and I later decided to put myself out there. I was treating it as a hobby and something fun, but I knew that I would need someone to go with me just to be safe. That's not to say there weren't many respectful people out there, but there are also assholes. A few days after the shoot, I again get the raw photos and the edits. I had finally accepted that the beautiful woman in the photos was actually me, and I begun to build some self-confidence. I went on to do a few other shoots with other photographers, and most of them were great. I generally wasn't getting paid except perhaps gas money here or there, but I was in it for the fun. I knew quite a lot of people in the BDSM scene. I knew a guy who wrote a monthly column in a local magazine featuring stories about kink, the local BDSM, and swinger scenes and whatnot. We communicated through a kinky social media site. He mentioned that he saw some of the photos I posted and asked to use them in the magazine. I let Ron know, and he agreed. The magazine came out, and I was sent a few copies. I ended up being the centerfold for a month, as well as having other photos scattered throughout, along with the other models Ron had shot. My photos ran for about 3 months. A few times I had people recognize me, but they didn't really say anything. Just that I was modeling had come up in the conversation. I was with fairly conservative people at the time, so I didn't think they would admit to reading a magazine like that. Really. Towards the ends of my photos being published, Ron contacted me again and wanted to schedule another shoot. We had hashed out some plans and I was looking forward to it. He mentioned there may be another model there, and I was excited to try working with someone else. The morning of the shoot, he called to cancel. The next day or so, I got a Facebook message from a mutual friend, Ethan. I hadn't spoken with in a very long time. It turns out that Ron's wife contacted another mutual friend and told the friend that Ron had been abusing her for years. He attacked her, slammed her against a wall into a glass picture, and then broke it over her head. She was covered in bruises and cuts. Her skin looked like she was a leopard. It was obvious he had been punching her and whatnot. Leah called the police, and they hauled Ron away and she received medical attention. Leah contacted me and asked me to visit because she had some things she wanted to discuss. I was filled with trepidation but went to see her. Leah was covered in cuts and bruises as I had been told. She had a black eye and was in a lot of pain, almost limping. As we went upstairs, I noticed that 2 of the bedrooms had padlocks on them. There were dents in the walls and what looked to be blood stains on the carpet, though it seemed like someone had tried to clean them up. She took me into his office and showed me a large and thick journal. Inside, he had written so many things about me. She only showed me a few pages, but did flip through and I saw my name many times. He wrote his impressions of me, that he wanted to use me, that I provided him contacts so he could find others, that I was his only, that my disinterest in dating him such a long time ago only proved that I was waiting for him. Many things like that. I was speechless. Even now, 5 years later, I don't know what to say. she showed me to her bedroom. She had been living in this room for a long time. It was wall-to-wall furniture you could barely move. It was extremely sad. In the other room, where she had broken the lock, was his room. There wasn't much in there but a bed, and then photos and magazines lining the walls. Many of them were from the magazine I got his work in, as well as some photos he had shot. He also had photos of me and his other models that he had pulled from various modeling photos. It looked like the photos covered up some sort of writing on the wall. As I was getting ready to go, she tells me that the picture frame, poster size, that he smashed over her head was a picture of me, the one used as a centerfold. She kept the print and asked me to take it. There was some blood spatter on it. I accepted it and left. I went back to visit her a few times, and it became more apparent that she was suffering, that he had been abusing her for years. She had been trying to make plans to sell the house and move away to make a better life. We lost contact, and I can only hope that she has found a new life for herself. Some mutual friends still stayed friends with him. I lost a lot of respect for them. They knew what happened, saw photos, and heard the story from many people. They didn't care. Leah and Ron divorced. The reason being family violence. Going to court was very hard on her. I believe she got her a permanent restraining order. He was convicted of beating her and various other things. I believe he did a brief stint in jail and then got probation. I saw him once or twice while I was out and about with friends, and I scrupulously avoided him. He's still working as a photographer, but there are no photos of me anywhere that I can find. For that, I am grateful. I wonder what may have happened if we had continued to work together. I believe his obsession with me would have increased. I dodged a bullet by a very narrow margin. Obsessive photographer and abuser, let's not meet. Edit. I spoke with a friend who knows all this, and he let me know that Ron was actually sent to full-on prison. I am relieved. I worry that since he is still doing photography, he will do this again. I'm certain he is mentally ill. I think once Ron posted about anti-social personality disorder on a private blog, as well as depersonalization. Ron is also engaged. I fear for his fiancée. I don't think he has ever gotten help. And once an abuser. 2. So before this even gets going, let me paint this picture for you. I was a freshman. Now, something you should know about me back then is that I was an early bloomer, in the sense that I could go buy cigs for my buddies without getting carded and never was thought to be under 20. Like any other teenagers, we were up late partying. Well, came down with the munchies at around 2 a.m., something like that. And we all put in money except me. So naturally, I was volunteered to walk. The gas station was probably about 2 or 3 blocks away. And even at this level of intoxication, I realized how bad an idea it was for a young girl to walk alone. My super buff, extremely intimidating friend was the first to pass out that night, and at this point has been knocked out with his foot balanced on a basketball for over an hour. And the other guy that was there happened to be duct taped to the wall in a sleeping bag. Also passed out. Instead, I made my fellow young teenage girl come with me. Good thinking. We were walking, bullshitting the entire way, honestly not feeling the intimidation or fear that was there upon leaving. We eventually made it to the gas station, which was well lit and plenty busy. On our way in, a group of 6 or 7 guys were outside the door, saying things like the lines of, "Hey ladies, let me talk to you." We ignored them. After spending about 20 minutes in the store just being blatantly fucked up, we probably stumbled out, and those guys were still there. Walking past, they said the same things. My friend and I just kept our eyes straight and head up, being that both of us were used to this and just expected it before we even left the store. We made it around the corner and halfway through the parking lot before we finally spoke. I remember looking behind us saying, "I hope they're not following us." Just moments before we heard, "Hey, Valley Fair. Hey, Stripes." My friend's shirt said Valley Fair and mine had stripes. This made my heart pound. I looked back again, and this time, they were coming around the corner, all at different speeds and different angles. We sped up, not wanting to let them see us run. Speed walking, I called my other buddy that was still at the house. She picked up laughing and asked why I was calling her. And at this point, the guys were getting closer and closer. This may sound ridiculous, but I have had a lot of fucked up things happen to me, and therefore it made me come off a little harsh or even fearless back then. And this friend knew that. So when she finally heard the tremble in my voice, her first reaction was to get very concerned. For some reason, I knew that if we started running, they would just move faster. But all my friend was screaming over the phone was, "Run, run, run!" And me, being high as hell and drunk out of my mind, I couldn't seem to move my legs fast enough. I physically could not lift them up, despite the fact that adrenaline was rushing through me, and I was aware I needed to move faster. My friend that was with me seemed to be in the same boat, because we just looked at each other, wide-eyed. The men were so close now that I could hear their conversation. I asked my friend if she could, and when the answer was no, I didn't tell her what I could hear. To this day, she has no idea. I heard them making plans for each one of us. Starting with me, still naming us by our shirts. They continue to say the most perverted things, but they'd speak a little louder then. This led me to believe they weren't aware I could hear their inner convo, and that made it even scarier. We ended up cutting through the back of the building, and the girl I was on the phone with was running towards us, whooping and hollering. We were still just walking. After we turned around to look, the guys were gone. They must have not followed us through the yard we walked into. Every time we went out for a smoke the rest of that night, it was spent silent, and the corners were constantly getting peeked around. But we never saw the men again. So, creepy gas station men, let's not meet. Ever. 3. This happened about 3 years ago, and it is still one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me. For background, I live in a city of just over 100,000 people. Not huge, but it has a lot of suburbs on the edge of town. I live near downtown, but my friend lived right in the middle of one of these suburbs. I was leaving her house at around 11:30 at night, and while I can't remember what day of the week it was, I remember not being terribly worried about running into anyone. From her house to mine was around 8 miles, and I was driving an e-bike, which is kind of like an electric moped that can only go about 20 miles per hour. Since the speed limit was usually 25 to 30 in the city, I was used to cars speeding around me. It was no big deal. Anyway, I leave her place and start driving home. The first half of the trip is uneventful, but as you get closer to downtown, the neighborhoods get rougher. Right around the halfway point, I'm parked at an intersection when I notice a kind of beat-up red Sunfire behind me. I thought it was a bit weird that they didn't pull up beside me, since cars at intersections usually did. I kept to the right side like any other cyclist would, but e-bikes were pretty new in my town at that point, so I figured they just didn't know how much space to give me. The light changes, I drive on, and it takes me another 2 blocks to realize the car is not passing me. This is where I realized things were weird. The car was trailing behind me only about 20 to 30 feet, and was coasting at 20 miles per hour despite the fact that there were no other cars anywhere on the road, so overtaking me would be easy. It was weirding me out, but I figured they would get bored and move on eventually. A couple miles later, I started heading into downtown, and sure enough, the car was still following me. I could only see them in my mirrors, but I could tell there were at least 2 people in the car. So I was outnumbered too. I start to get worried as I get closer to home, realizing I'm going to have to stop eventually, and wondering what will happen when I do. My house, despite being near downtown, was on a quiet street that barely got any traffic, and wasn't very well lit. As I am approaching a yellow light, I decide to risk running it, to leave them behind at the red light. I turn left, only to be greeted by another red light. Thinking quick, I turn right on the road, but I can hear the squealing tires as the first light turns green, and the car circles around the block, the way I didn't go, to meet up with me. At this point, I'm facing the car on the side street dead on. I have 2 choices: drive towards the car or turn left. The car is not moving, instead waiting for me to make a decision. I turn left, as it's away towards my house, and the car calmly turns to follow behind me. At this point, I'm losing it, even though it's cold and I'm shaking like mad. I take out my cell phone and call my boyfriend. I know, I should have called the police, but I was freaking out. I tell him he had better get his ass outside our place right now because there's no way I'm stopping alone. At the same time, I'm describing the make and model of the car as best I can, while also trying not to crash. When the people in the car realize I'm on the phone, they decide to overtake me. As they do, I look over and see 2 men, rough looking, probably in their 30s. They're laughing their heads off, not in a, what a fun joke, but in a cruel way, like they're going to get me no matter what. It's absolutely terrifying. I figured that they thought I was calling the cops, so I start to calm down. They're still going pretty slow ahead of me, but at least they aren't following me anymore. As I'm coming up to the street I live on, I make sure to wait until they're past the intersection before I put on my right blinker, and they put on theirs. I turn onto my street as their tires squeal again, turning onto the street 1 block up. I know that they can go faster than me, and I contemplate trying to find somewhere to hide. I decide against it, and sure enough, as I come up to the first intersection, their car is sitting perpendicular to me, waiting for me to pass by so they can follow again. It seemed like it was some kind of hilarious, cruel game to them. Watching me try to get away and knowing they could always go faster. As we approached my house, I saw my boyfriend standing on the lawn, arms crossed and leering at the car. He wasn't good for much, but I'm glad as hell he was there. I pulled into the driveway, and as the car was halfway into the driveway as well, they finally saw him. They were gone before I could even turn my bike off. So creepy, nasty man who decided I'd be their fun game for the night. Let's not meet.